was so proud of y'all giving your presentations. A lot of y'all had taken notes from my relaxed state of conversation here and leaning, and so y'all did well. Got graded well on that. But this particular section is bringing out a kind of a unique point about the nervous system. We've learned that back in chapter 9, I believe it was, that the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems are typically antagonistic. And we're seeing in the reproductive system here, in the male and the female, that these two systems must work together to function, to make the reproductive system function. So in this, on 713, the topic erection, emission, ejaculation, the parasympathetic system is necessary for erection, but ejaculation requires a sympathetic response. So this is one of the few times they actually work together and to make the reproductive system function. So parasympathetic, erection, sympathetic, ejaculation. Moving from there over to 715, and we get to male fertility. We're going to hit some book knowledge here. And this is going to be a little bit different wherever you read. There's a little bit of contradiction in some of their reading, but it's not off much. We're going to be in the same ballpark and say, well, numbers don't mean anything. It just takes one sperm to get there, right? Typically, yeah, but the journey starts with several million, and the death toll is extremely high. So it's important to start with at least enough, or one may make it. The approximate volume of semen, 1.5 to 5 milliliters. 1.5 to 5. 1.5 is really low, but it can be a minimal. 1.5 to 5 milliliters. The bulk of the fluid, 45 to 80%, is seminal vesicle fluid. 15 to 30% contributed by the prostate. There are usually about 60 to 150 million sperm per milliliter of ejaculate. So if you have 60 million sperm at 1.5 milliliters, and you're only looking at 90 million sperm, and that's not very many. Anything, and they'll tell you in here at some point, anything less, well, the next paragraph, anything less than 50 million per milliliter is considered clinically infertile. Okay, so 50 million, well, 50 million they're saying per ejaculate. You should at least have 50 million per milliliter. So 50 million per ejaculate is, you're infertile, is what that comes down to. You're considered to be oligospermic. And so if 50 million per ejaculate, they're basically calculating 20 million per milliliter. And so at 1.5, that only gives you 30 million, so that doesn't even come out to their calculations in the book of 50 million. So anyway, what's 20 million at this point, I guess. So, you know, and we can look at the book all day, and that old Fred over here, he only has 30 million sperm to his name, but he's got 14 kids. So things like that do happen, and there are miracles out there that do happen. So now, things that can play a role in oligospermia or too few sperm, things that we've already mentioned: heat, extreme heat, sauna, hot tubs, various pharmaceutical drugs, lead and arsenic poisoning. That would be something you might get at home in your food on a gradual basis over 10 or 12 years before you die. Charday's laughing, so I think she's already done that. You're not even married yet, are you? And you're already feeding him a little arsenic poisoning in there? Let's see what else. And such illicit drugs such as marijuana, cocaine, and anabolic steroids. So all those drugs could damage fertility. Now, as we mentioned before, the ladies are born with all the eggs they'll ever have. If they bombard and damage their eggs, they don't grow new ones, do you? Now, guys, we can get over here and smoke pot and decide, oh, we're going to clean up our life 10 years down the line, and all of a sudden we produce good sperm again. That's just wrong, but that's the way it is. You agree with that, Curly? That's just not right, is it? So guys are stupid, aren't they? Okay, as long as you know. I tell my kids that all the time, especially my daughters. I said, guys are stupid, but you're a guy. I said, I'm stupid. Stay away from them, they're bad. At some point, you might find one good one, but I'll pick him out for you, so. And if he's not, I'll kill him, so. On 7:16, in male fertility, this is the one means of male infertility, I guess, it really works, is a vasectomy. It's 99% effective. Now, when we get into the contraceptives a little bit later in this chapter, we will discuss several different contraceptives, and let me just throw some test questions at you here. If I'm talking about just the male, then this is the most effective. Vasectomy is the most effective. It's 99% effective. And why is there a 1% difference? Because 1% of males will have a third vas deferens. And when they give a vasectomy and they only cut 2 tubes and there's a third one in there, it's probably real vestigial and not highly functional. But when the other two become dysfunctional, that one becomes functional. And so that's the 1%. And I had a friend that hit and almost caused divorce because he said, I had a vasectomy, there's no way you could be pregnant unless you're cheating on me. And but when the kid got here, he was the father, there's no doubt. The kid looks just like him. But if he had done his job after the vasectomy, you're supposed to go back and bring a sample of sperm, a sample of semen back to the lab.
No one does that.
No, and he didn't, so it cost him another kid. And the doctor told him, I'll go in there and find that one now. It'll be easy to find now. He told me to do it for free. He never would go back and get it done. But anyway, he was one of those 1% that had a third vas deferens, and they're still together today. They never did. After the kid got here, he could not deny the kid. It was all him. There was Mama wasn't cheating anywhere, I promise you. Kid looks just like him today. But vasectomy, now if I'm talking about across the board in females, probably the contraceptive pill or some form of that is still running that 97 to 98, 99% effective there. And there's so many forms of that as our demonstration, or who did the y'all did it, the different forms of birth control. Now, the only form, and I think y'all had this in there, that's 100% effective is abstinence. Just stay away from it altogether. So, and that's the only form that will never give you an STD as well. Keep your distance. Of course, as a father, I have to be crude sometimes, and I'm sure you've never heard any of this, Jennifer, but always.
I managed to avoid the entire conversation until I was 18.
There you go. I'd always tell my daughter, I'd always give her the worst scenarios, and she'd go out on dates, and I'd say, now listen, it takes 2 to tango, and if your pants are on, nothing can ever happen. And so I just, blunt as I can be, and if she takes care of her end of it, and other than that, it'd have to be rape. So if you're careful who you go out with, then that's likely not to happen either. And we were fortunate. We didn't have any mishaps there. Now I'm already working on my 6-year-old. I'm trying to train her, but girls are killing me. Just killing me. All right. That takes us into the female section. And this is where we're going to start just looking at it up here on the board. And I'm going to be all through the next 7 or 8 pages. And what we want to look at here, I hope this shows up pretty good on there, is we have day 14 right in here, day 0 and day 28. This would be a female cycle, 28-day cycle, normal cycle. Ovulation occurs somewhere on day 14. With ovulation occurring on day 14, and believe me, that's going to vary per person, so you ladies have to know your own body and know your own cycle for this to really happen. It could happen on day 13, day 15. It could miss totally this month, things we've already talked about. So 13, 12, 11, 15, go out there. We've got 4 hormones we're going to look at here. and estrogen being one. Estrogen probably is the one that fluctuates the least because it maintains secondary sex characteristics. It can never totally go away, or you probably have hair falling out and everything else. So it probably fluctuates the least, but it makes some fluctuations. It comes in here and makes a spike right in here somewhere, and then levels off and comes in here. And if it does have a low time, that low time will be the first 5 days of your cycle, which is the time of menstruation, right? Okay. We have LH. LH is going to be real low here, and LH will surge right after this estrogen surge, fall back off, and absolutely do nothing. But that surge is significant because the increase of estrogen is what causes the LH surge, and that's what causes ovulation. That is a positive feedback mechanism that will be on the test. Increase estrogen, increase LH, ovulation. Day 12, day 13, day 14, bam, bam, bam. You can go to Walmart and buy an ovulation test kit. It tests for increased LH in the urine. Works just like a pregnancy test, except it's testing for something different. It's testing for LH. And when LH is at its highest, you will ovulate in the next 24 hours. And that's how those kits work. Follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, is climbing here, and then it starts coming off here, and pretty null and void over here. We're building follicles. The follicles are feeding off the estrogen that's already here. This, in fact, the first 14 days is called the follicular phase. The last 14 days is called the luteal phase. Progesterone is the other one. Progesterone comes in here pretty low, stays low here, starts climbing somewhere in here, is at its highest midway through the luteal. If pregnancy does not occur, it falls off the bandwagon as well. Now, progesterone is the hormone that maintains a pregnancy. If you're pregnant, progesterone will be high throughout that pregnancy. It's what seals up the process and allows for the baking of the child in the oven to occur. You didn't like that terminology there, Jennifer?
Love that.
It basically, progesterone closes the oven, and so we cook for about 200 and so many days. 38 to 40 weeks, we talk in weeks and trimesters. Okay. If pregnancy does not occur, progesterone falls off. So the luteal phase is a phase in which we expect pregnancy. That term luteal is coming from what's left on the ovary after ovulation, and that's the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum. The contraceptive pill, this is how it works. It mimics the luteal phase. The contraceptive pill will have estrogens in it. It'll have more progesterone. It'll make your body think it ovulated, but it didn't. If it didn't, it's hard to get pregnant in. Now, there are things that contradict that. There's some antibiotics, maybe some different kinds of steroids that can actually contradict that. So, in those times of antibiotics and steroids, abstinence would need to be practiced, or pregnancy could occur. So, there's a lot of kids been born off of that situation. And a lot of people don't know it. They think they're on the pill, they're good. But then they get a massive strep throat infection and they're taking antibiotics, and boom, there it happens. All right, times of conception here. The highest time of conception is 3 days prior to ovulation, 1 day post. There's about a 5-day window of conception. 3 days prior. Now, if ovulation occurs on day 14, 3 days prior is 11, 12, 13. If ovulation's on day 13 for you, then we got to back it up one. See what I'm saying? So 3 days prior. Now, the egg is not going to live in the fallopian tube very long, 36 hours tops. If it doesn't meet up with the man of its life, then she's done. She's not going to stand around to be stood up. That egg's moving on down the fallopian tube and will actually start breaking down, degenerate, go away. As it moves down the fallopian tube, it becomes less capable of being fertilized. Fertilization will take place in fallopian tubes in the upper 1/3 of the fallopian tubes. Sperm can live in the female body, if it survives to this point, huge death toll, up to 72 hours. So there's your 3 days. Okay? When you add 36 hours to that, we're getting almost 5 days out of that. So there's your 3 days sperm, almost 2 days egg. You got some good drawings going on there, Curly. Good girl. All right. Something else that we have to point out here as well. This increase of estrogen right here causes glands in the uterus to produce a clear watery mucus that comes through the cervix. The female produces this, and this is basically the highway the sperm must travel. And so this is a time in which the female body is actually receptive to sperm because it has a place to go. But as progesterone increases, the clear watery mucus becomes a mucus plug, and it plugs up the cervix. The cervix is very, very small opening to get up to the uterus, to get up to the fallopian tubes where fertilization can take place. So when progesterone's high, nothing gets through the cervix because it's a mucus plug that closes it off, which we're expecting pregnancy, right? We don't need anything up in there bothering the developmental process here, infection, bacteria. We close it off. And so progesterone will close it off. Estrogen says, yes, this is the time in which you can enter so we can get pregnant for this stage over here. So keep that part in mind. Now, if we go over here, may have to adjust the camera a little bit for my fine drawing over here. We get us a couple of ovaries. You like my ovaries? Okay. Get us, I have to put together some pretty good sized fallopian tubes so we can actually see what's going on. You know what's really, if we were to actually look at the female reproductive tract, the entire ovaries, fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix, all of it would fit in the palm of your hand. That's how small it is when it starts. And to become pregnant and to distend that much and to hold this pregnancy, you're talking about an amazing component of the body to do this, and then after pregnancy go back to normal size. It's incredible.
That's why guys should get the vasectomy.
I agree. It's the cheapest way out. I mean, all right, so we have ovaries on the side, this being the fallopian tubes. What's some other names for fallopian tubes? Uterine tubes, oviducts. On the frog, we dissected oviducts, right? That's what they used on a frog. Fallopian tubes, uterine tubes, oviducts, all the same. And this being the uterus, this is where the pregnancy will be housed. And typically in the body of the uterus, which would be the upper component of the uterus. And then, of course, here's the vagina, the cervix, and I've got the cervix opening quite large, but the cervix actually is an extension of the uterus that protrudes out into the vagina. And it's not, you know, if we wanted a lot of things to go up in this area, it would be more of a funnel in this direction, but it's not. It's actually in the opposite direction, which makes things even more difficult to get up in there. So the easiest way to get up into the uterus is follow the clear watery mucus. What the female body says, this is okay. Now, back to some sperm counts here. Let's say we have 3 milliliters of semen, and let's say there's 300 million sperm starting this journey. Okay, 300 million sperm starting the journey, and they mentioned seminal vesicle secretions was over 60%. They mentioned prostate secretions. Part of the prostate secretion is coagulation proteins. And coagulation proteins, what they do is cause the semen to pool. It's actually quite thick and almost mucousy. After 20 minutes inside the female body, I guess it's probably the temperature as much as anything. It breaks down those proteins and it becomes more liquefied. All right? So the purpose of this is to keep the sperm within this pool, because if it gets outside the pool, the vagina of the female body is a kind of a protective area for the female. There's going to be white blood cells. I think in our last lab where we was talking about the white rat, you always love the white rat lab, right? Can you just imagine this little rat sitting up in stirrups and getting not a good picture. But they was talking about at what different stages of the cycle, what kind of cells you'd find, whether it be leukocytes or cornified squamous cells, or, well, this particular area of the female reproductive tract, the vagina, is not only acidic, it has a lot of white blood cells in it. And it's there for protection. If bacteria, any type of infectious agent may get in this area, we try to kill it off so it doesn't even have a chance to get up the cervix. And granted, there's a long period out of this 28-day cycle, progesterone's got this blocked off anyway, but we don't even want it to get there. Because if it gets up in here and causes infection, that's really, number one, it's hard to treat. Number two, it could cause sterility. So we try to just wall this area off and prevent it. So this is an environment that's not conducive to a lot of things, sperm included. If sperm gets outside that pool, this environment will kill it, bottom line. So the sperm, as it, or the semen, as it breaks down the proteins, coagulation proteins, it actually, as most liquid will, it'll start becoming a bigger area. Well, if we have the mucus coming from the mucus glands inside, it'll eventually make contact with that mucus. And then the sperm can go from the semen pool to the mucus without getting attacked by the female body. So this is her invitation to the sperm. And there's going to be sperm, we're gonna have sperm that may have two tails. They're not sure which direction they're going to swim, and that happens. You'll have some sperm that'll have what's called proximal droplets that inhibits motility. And this is a maturity thing. Sperm's not totally mature yet. You'll have more other sperm with distal droplets, and what happens, the proximal eventually filters down, falls off the tail, now the sperm's capable of swimming. So that's a maturity. There's going to be immature sperm. You'll have sperm that has crooked tails, and when they swim around circles like dog chasing their tail, and they're not going to go anywhere. Then you have sperm, and I'm sure we'll just identify this sperm as a Y sperm, because he fights his way outside the semen pool, and goes up into the vaginal blindfold, and just fertilizes the heck out of the vaginal blindfold. Why it's a Y sperm? Because he obviously didn't ask directions, and that's going to be a male thing. Would you agree, Ron? We're certainly not going to stop at a 7-Eleven and ask a female clerk directions. That's just wrong, you know. So anyway, this sperm dies of exhaustion, and we simply call that sperm an idiot sperm. We don't need that sperm fertilizing an egg anyway. There's enough idiot people running around already. Some of those sperm did get by. So with that death toll, with that huge death toll, we have 500 make it up into the uterus. Look what we started with. You think there was a mass killing going on right there? Mass killing, lack of motility, whatever, mobility, I think is a term that some of y'all use. I had a student in class one time, and I'll never forget this. And he is a little bit of an older gentleman, but he's always, you can see him back there, the wheels is always turning in his head. It's kind of scary, because you could just see, you could see that little white rat turning in his cage in there, you know. And I was kind of giving this lecture, and was talking about the death toll here, only 500 make it, and I see his hand go up, and I said, oh Lord, what's he gonna ask? I said, yeah, what's your question? He said, if I'm getting this right, tell me if I'm wrong, but if I'm thinking correctly, what you're telling me is that the vagina of the female is an extremely hostile environment. I said, you're exactly right. You couldn't put it any better, because it killed off a lot of sperm. And it is. I guess you could say it gets a lot of people into a lot of trouble in one way or another. Kills a lot of sperm as well. So, but those 500 make it here. 100 make it up each fallopian tube, okay? And if we have an egg setting there, these 100 go through what's called a capacitation time. Capacitation time 7 to 8 hours. That this sperm's trying to swim up through this. Cilia, this is cilia lined here. The cilia is sweeping the egg this way, and the sperm's trying to go this way. It's like salmon swimming upstream. Well, this capacitation time plays a role in this. If we have a normal, if I can speak, a normal sperm, this sperm has a cap over it. And right here at the tip of the sperm is an enzyme. The enzyme's necessary to eat into the egg's envelope to fertilize the egg. But we don't want the enzyme exposed here. It'll be used up before it gets to the egg. So we have this cap on the sperm, and it swims, and then it gets into this cilia. I can see it swimming 3 cilia up, and the next cilia slaps it back 2. Swims 3 more up, slap back 2. 7 to 8 hours to make it from here to the egg. Well, that cilia literally slaps the cap right off the tip of that sperm. So when the sperm does reach the egg, what's exposed is the enzyme necessary to eat into the shell of the egg. And as soon as that happens, the DNA is in the head of the sperm. When it enters the egg, the tail falls off, and the egg seals itself to prevent another sperm from entering it. If 2 sperm enter it simultaneously, we've got 23, 23, 23. That's not human, is it? It'll be rejected. 1 sperm enters 1 egg, 23, 23, gives you 46. The egg seals itself to prevent polyspermy. And now we start mitotic divisions in the form of from 2 cells, 4 cells, to 8 cells, 16, 32, 64, and it does this within hours. Something we'll probably talk about Friday in class as we go through the developmental stages. So capacitation is very, very important. Technically, sperm cannot fertilize without spending time in the female body. Now, we have learned in the labs, the artificial insemination things, they go through, and who did did somebody talk about artificial insemination here? The other class must have picked up on that. And they talked about washing sperm. Now, if they're preparing for artificial insemination, they'll actually take sperm and they'll wash it. I don't know what they're washing it in. I heard one lab technician say when they get finished washing it, it's like you can watch sperm under the microscope prior to washing it, and it's swimming around. Boy, I mean, it's moving around. And then after they wash it, whatever they wash it with, that somehow what they do, it mimics some of this gland secretions that's in the uterus, that's in this clear mucus. It's something that's similar to that. So after they wash it and they look at it under the microscope, it's just like sperm on speed is how he described it. He said, after we wash it, you got sperm on speed. They are high and ready to go, fueled up. It's like, get out of the way. We're going to go fertilize something. It may be a vaginal blind spot wall here, who knows, but sperm on speed. But anyway, those sperm have to make its way up there without getting totally killed off. Let's see. Definitely got to spend time in the female body, except for what we've learned to do in some of the lab. But still, an artificial insemination. They'll do an intrauterine insemination, which is real easy, and they'll deposit it right here. And then there's some that'll do, they'll go to what's it's called the interfallopian IV. They can actually take the tube up here, and the tube will have an air bulb on it that they can blow up, and that bulb will lodge right there, and then they can deposit the sperm here, where it's much closer to the eggs at that point. A little more successful there, but the uterus is so sensitive at this point in the cycle that it may cause a little bit of spotting or bleeding, and could cause some uterine contractions because this balloon's putting pressure on the muscle walls there. So there's advantages that this causes a little more stress in the reproductive system. This causes less. This one's extremely simple. This one's a little more precise. Typically, you'd like to do that with an ultrasound because you don't want to, if you end up going around the corner and depositing here, and all the sperm's going here and your egg sitting over here, that's a bad move. But you can also damage fallopian tubes much easier, so you typically don't want to mess around up in the fallopian tubes. So that's just kind of a doctor's choice. Some of them's really good at it, some of them are trying to get good at it, and you're the experimental animal. So, a little bit on in vitro, since we didn't have that lecture in here, did we? Anybody get?
We did in vitro.
Did y'all do? Okay, y'all did in vitro. The in vitro was we'd superovulate these ovaries over here, and there'd be a bunch of eggs sitting on there. And they'd take a real long needle and go through the vaginal wall and go out here and pluck these eggs off. If there's 8 eggs, they'd go through that wall 8 times, pluck these eggs off. However many eggs they are, and the woman's obviously sedated, totally out. We don't need her moving around or anything. We need her completely still. And this is fairly traumatic. I think y'all talked about in y'all's deal how that superovulatory drugs cause this ovary really to get pretty big. And that could be a damaging effect. But they'll wait 3 to 5 days before they put this fertilized embryo back in. They put the eggs in a dish, they look at them. The ones that look good, they'll keep. The one that looks bad, they'll discard. Typically then they'll take the sperm, and most of them will just do ICSI now. They won't turn the sperm loose in there and let them fertilize. They'll pick a good sperm and inject it. ICSI is intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Besides that, they want to charge you another $250 to do that. So if we can get the cost up there, it's more money for us to make, right? So, and they'll inject all these with a sperm. This is what makes male infertility really easy, because even though he might be clinically infertile, if you're producing 20 million sperm, we can find 5 sperm in there that's good. Okay. So then we watch these to see they grow. They're growing good at day 3. We may let them go to day 5, and then at that point we'll put it back right somewhere right in here. Sometimes they'll put them up in the edge of fallopian tubes and let them come back down to implant. If they seem like they're slow in growth at day 3 or so, they'll go ahead and put back in the mom at day 3, and they may put an extra one in there if growth is slowing in the petri dish. And that's because this environment seems to be a much better environment for a growing embryo than a dish in an oven. Imagine that. But they'll put an extra one in there to increase chances. If everything's going great here, then they'll let mom's body heal up just a little more. Now she'll be on progesterone shots. And the reason they do that is because they plucked so many ovaries off of this, they may have damaged the corpus luteum. And if you damage the corpus luteum, then progesterone levels are not good. So you'll be on progesterone shots for about 8 weeks. If pregnancy occurs, which we'll know before that, we'll watch progesterone levels as they climb above what your shot's doing, and we'll gradually take you off progesterone because your placenta's taken over. So let's say pregnancy occurs. We come back down here, and we have a pregnancy right here. The first thing that it develops is called the human chorion. It's that's the first component of the placenta. The chorion produces HCG. That's the hormone that tells you you're pregnant. If you take a pregnancy test, that's what it's testing for. HCG sends a message to the corpus luteum right there. Corpus luteum produces progesterone that maintains the pregnancy. So this feedback right here continues for that 8 weeks. After 8 weeks, the placenta is now your primary endocrine gland. And it produces all the progesterone and estrogens and anything else you need for this pregnancy after 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks in humans. And it will continue to maintain that. And really, once the placenta takes over, if the placenta gets 4 or 5 weeks under its belt, it is extremely difficult to miscarry. But up to the point of the placenta taking over, that's your highest range of miscarriage. And the reason is sometimes this communication chain gets broken. HCG doesn't get the corpus luteum. Corpus luteum doesn't know to produce more progesterone. A lot of times women will have miscarriages really, really early. They'll find out they're pregnant, and the next week they're not. And this may happen once, it may happen twice, but doctors catch on to this. This will be one of the first things they'll check. So the next time you get pregnant, doctor really should be aware of this, and immediately, as soon as you find out you're pregnant, you need to be at the doctor, because then he's gonna prescribe you progesterone. And you'll be on, they make progesterone suppositories, injections, however you want. If you want big honking needles or suppositories, they can do either one. But they'll, regardless of this communication here, we're gonna override the corpus luteum, and we're gonna maintain progesterone levels until the placenta takes over. When it takes over, we're good. So, we've come a long ways in making pregnancies work. So, it's pretty amazing. Anybody have any particular questions here? This kind of ties up several pages that, of the female body. If you look on 717, they go over some female parts. We've listed the major ones, the fallopian tubes. We didn't go over the 3 layers of the uterus, but we might explain this. During the menstruation process, the endometrial layer is what is sloughed off during the menstrual process. And there is a purpose for that. This is not for just torture of every woman on earth, but the purpose of that is so the uterus can build a new layer for the next possibility of pregnancy. Because if we have a layer of old cells, they're not as apt to function as well as a layer of new cells. So we create a new layer every month for the new chance of pregnancy. And they give you a good, and they go over perimetrium, myometrium, endometrium. They go over other parts there, you can read through those. They go over the follicles over the next page. Ovulation is listed on 720. And I'm not to the page I'm looking for yet. 724 is the page I'm looking for. So if you go to 724 and you look at this chart, the very bottom of the chart is showing you the uterine development. You see, uterine development at days 0 to 3 or 4 is at its lowest, and even shows sloughing. But then you start at day 5 or so, you're starting to build this uterine structure again. And it becomes its most vascular somewhere in this range here, where the embryo, when it embeds itself in it and produces the chorion, it's actually hooking up to mom's blood supply. And it's most vascular, it's most spongy at this point. It'll have more of a toned feel to it. And so they show on day 21, 23, 24 in there that's going to be a very vascular time. And then back to day 0 to 1, we're back to sloughing off again if pregnancy does not occur. So, they also show you estrogen, progesterone levels up there, follicular phase, luteal phase at the top, showing developing follicles, and corpus luteum progression and regression toward the end of that. Now, at what point can we determine actual pregnancy now? Now, if it takes about 8 days for a fertilized egg to go from here to here, and by 10 we're implanted. If you think about that, if we're implanted by day 10, are we not producing HCG? We should be. Once HCG is being produced, it doubles on a daily basis. I still run with the theory of HCG is what causes morning sickness. Because morning sickness, typically, you've had morning sickness? You, no? None? Did you have any morning sickness? None? Now, there goes my theory. Now, morning sickness will typically start going away by week 12 to 14. When does the placenta take over? It's at least taken over by week 10, right? But HCG is at its highest levels at that point, only to start declining, and may take several more weeks to totally decline out of the body. Now, I have done a little bit of side research. In one class a couple semesters ago, I had a female in there that was about 8 months pregnant and one that was about 6 months pregnant. And the one that was 8 months pregnant, we had her take a pregnancy test, and the pregnancy test said she was not pregnant. What was it testing for? HCG. Is HCG necessary at 8 months of pregnancy? No. What's taken over? Placenta. At 6 months pregnant, she was still testing positive. So there's still a little HCG hanging around in the system. I'm not sure exactly where that happens. Amber, how far along are you? 6 months. See, we need to test you in January. Well, December, really. We need to do a series of tests there over a couple weeks to see, it's day, week. We need to narrow it down to where HCG is gone. Because it's not necessary, but it takes a while for it to go out of the system. So, an interesting concept if you think about it. We know for a fact this lady's 8 months pregnant, yet the pregnancy test says you're not pregnant. That's pretty awesome if you think about it. So it's just understanding the hormone. All right, anything else there? As far as the chapter goes, 725, we have the phases here that correspond to the chart on 724, and they're talked about on 725, proliferative phase, secretory phase, menstrual phase, which y'all talked about these in the last lab we turned in, right? Didn't y'all have to fill in some blanks with some of these phases? You remember that, Sharday?
Yeah.
All right, tells me you actually did that work, so. All right, effects of pheromones, stress, and body fat. And then we get a little contraception going on there, and I think we're good for today, so. Let's quit right there. Here's my plans. You can go ahead and turn that off, Tracy.